The email came at 9:14 a.m., sharp, subject line, wedding update. I almost laughed when I read it. Hey sis, Mom said it's better if you just watch through the live stream. You know how small the venue is. Love you! Small venue. Right. Melissa had posted drone footage of the vineyard last week. Acres of sunlight and imported roses. A place where even the shadows cost money. I set my phone down on the marble counter and stared at the words until they blurred. By the time the live stream began, I had already poured a glass of champagne. My hand trembled slightly as I raised it to my lips, the screen filled with laughter, white lace and gold sunlight. Guests milled around the garden, each chair covered in silk ribbons. And yet, I counted at least a dozen of them empty. Small venue, I muttered. Mom was in the front row, dabbing her eyes like she hadn't told me last month that there just wasn't space. Dad stood beside her looking proud. Melissa glowed in her designer gown. The one I later learned cost nearly as much as the loan I'd given our parents 3 years ago. $15,000 for a medical emergency. Turns out, the only thing sick was my trust. The money had gone to her bridal shower in Malibu. On the screen, Melissa laughed at something her maid of honor said. She looked perfect. She always did. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not envy exactly, just the cold ache of being written out of your own family story. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the glass. I just watched. The bubbles in the champagne flattened. The applause rose and fell. And somewhere between the vows and the kiss, something inside me hardened. I set the glass down carefully, wiped the condensation from the counter, and stared at my reflection in the black screen once the stream ended. I stopped being afraid a long time ago. I whispered to the empty room. Melissa always got the good things first. The good dresses, the good grades, the good excuses. I still remember standing in that cramped boutique when Mom zipped up the $600 prom gown on her and said, "Just look at her. She was made for moments like this." Then she turned to me and added, "Lauren, there's a clearance rack in the back, honey. You'll find something simple but classy." I smiled like it didn't sting, even as I handed over my own babysitting cash to pay for the hem on that simple dress. That was the first time I realized how quietly favoritism can bleed you. Not all wounds are loud. Some hum for years. The art scholarship fund came next. I had worked for it. Won competitions, filled sketchbooks with graphite dreams. Then one day, Dad announced at dinner that Melissa needed help buying her first car. "You'll understand when you have a family," he'd said, tapping my hand like I should be proud to sacrifice. "She just needs more help." The words stuck in my throat like gravel. My scholarship fund, 5 years of savings and grants, was redirected to buy her a used convertible she wrecked 2 months later. No apology, just another lesson in hierarchy. At 21, when my friends threw me a small surprise birthday at our apartment, I waited all night for a call from home. None came. The next morning, I opened Facebook and saw the reason: Melissa's surprise engagement. My parents were there, holding champagne flutes and smiling under twinkling lights. I wasn't even told she was dating anyone. That was the pattern. Her needs were emergencies. Mine were inconveniences. Every family dinner turned into a sermon about patience, understanding, or how Melissa's just going through a hard time. But the real fracture came the summer I turned 18. I was accepted to Cornell's architecture program. Mom hugged me, teary-eyed, and said she was proud. But a month before tuition was due, she called me to the kitchen table. Dad was there holding the ledger from my college account. "Sweetheart," he began, "we had to move your savings. Melissa's going through something difficult. Credit cards, rent, you know how it is." "Move?" I repeated. "Move where?" "To her," he said plainly, like it was a weather report. "She and Tyler needed a wedding deposit, and you'll have more opportunities later." $42,000. My future, gone in one breath. I didn't scream. I just stood up, the room spinning. Mom said softly, "Don't be dramatic, Lauren." Family helps family. I left that night, packed everything I owned into the back seat of my old Civic, and drove to Seattle. I didn't look back. I didn't even tell them when I started at community college 6 months later, juggling classes and a diner job. I learned how to make ramen stretch 4 days. I learned how to keep promises to myself, because no one else would. When I saw Melissa's wedding photos in a magazine, her in a cathedral-length veil, captioned Classic Portland Elegance, I almost laughed. They didn't just steal my money. They taught me exactly what love shouldn't feel like. 17 years later, I hardly recognized that version of me. The nights were still long, but now they smelled like coffee and blueprints instead of anxiety. I'd stayed late drafting plans, chasing perfection across glowing screens. My first big break came when a developer picked my eco-housing concept out of a stack of 200 entries. That single project earned me a $120,000 contract. I met Daniel on site. He was the paramedic covering a construction accident. He had kind eyes, quiet humor, and a way of grounding me when success started to feel unreal. We married 3 years later, quietly, just us and a courthouse. Now my name shone on glass. Hayes and Coleman Design Forbes called me one of the top 30 architects under 40. The article mentioned my resilient trajectory but didn't know the half of it. When I received my first $1.8 million bonus, Daniel took me to dinner at the Space Needle. Between the city lights and champagne flutes, he said, "You built this from ashes." I smiled, thinking of Portland, the ghosts I left there, the silence that taught me how to listen to myself. They taught me survival, I said. I turned it into strategy. The sound of construction filled the air, the rhythmic hammering, the hum of generators, the low chatter of workers. I stood at the edge of the resort balcony, hard hat in hand, watching sunlight spill across the curved glass walls I'd designed years earlier on sleepless nights. The Evermere Eco Resort, $40 million of ambition and defiance, finally stood finished. I'd imagined this place 1,000 times. Steel ribs shaped like waves, windows that breathed light, wood reclaimed from forest fires reborn into beauty. Reporters called it a cathedral of sustainability. I called it proof. The day the resort opened, cameras flashed, investors shook hands, and my firm's name, Hayes and Coleman Design, gleamed on the marble plaque. Daniel caught me by the elbow before the ribbon cutting. "You did it," he whispered. "You really did it." That night we drove home to the lake. A modern 2-story house I'd bought for $2.3 million. Every window, every frame, every line, drawn by my hand. Sometimes I'd walk through it barefoot at night, the glass reflecting the moon like water. Every inch of it whispered the same truth. I built this from nothing. When I posted a photo the next morning, sunlight pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows, my coffee mug balanced on the sill, I captioned it simply, "The view I built myself." Tag. Worth I cerned, the post exploded. 1.2 million likes, DMs from design magazines, a few distant classmates saying, "Wow, you've made it." And then, buried in the notifications, I saw it. Melissa Hayes. "Wow, sis. So proud of you. Haven't talked in forever." I stared at the comment for a long time, thumb hovering over delete. I didn't delete it. I wanted her to see the silence that followed, the world reacting without her. The next morning, a message from Mom. "Can we talk?" "It's been too long." I stared at it, feeling the old tug in my chest, that reflex to soften, to make space. Then I typed back, slow and calm, "Sure, how about after the wedding?" And I hit send. 2 weeks before Melissa's wedding, my phone rang at midnight. Her name glowed on the screen. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity, that old wound disguised as concern, won out. "Lauren?" Her voice cracked through the speaker. I hate asking this, but we're in a mess. The venue's threatening to cancel." I stayed quiet. "They said we need to clear the final payment, $60,000. We maxed out our cards after the catering deposit, and Mom said you might..." She trailed off, waiting for mercy she hadn't earned. In the background, I heard muffled voices, Mom's, calm and rehearsed. Then she took the phone. "Sweetheart, you're doing so well," she said, the same tone she used when I was a child being guilted into sharing toys. "It's just family helping family." I looked at the framed copy of my first paycheck hanging on the wall, 1/2/157, earned after 3 months of working 2 jobs and surviving on instant noodles. That number had once been my entire world. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't say no. I'll attend, I said instead. Melissa exhaled in relief, misreading everything. Oh, thank you, Lauren. I knew you'd... But I had already hung up. I sat there in the dark for a long time, listening to the faint buzz of the phone cooling on the table. Daniel stirred in bed, asked softly, "Everything okay?" I nodded, staring out at the lake. It will be, because something inside me had shifted, a calm, deliberate resolve. The kind that doesn't come from anger, but from clarity. I thought of that empty chair on her live stream, the one they said wasn't available for me. I'll give them exactly what they gave me, I murmured. Distance. The vineyard shimmered under a lazy California sun, rows of gold and green stretching toward the horizon. I pulled up to the gate in my black Tesla Model S, the hum of the motor silent against the rustling leaves. The valet's eyebrows rose slightly when he saw my name on the RSVP list, Lauren Hayes. I smiled. They hadn't expected me. That was the point. Inside, the air smelled of money, white roses, imported wine, and polished oak. Melissa stood near the terrace in a gown that probably cost more than my first apartment. When she saw me, her jaw dropped. "Lauren?" she stammered, clutching her bouquet. "You came." I took off my sunglasses and smiled, slow and steady. Just wanted to see how far my college fund went. Her face twitched, the kind of nervous smile that hides a sting. "You look different. Successful?" I offered, tilting my head. She laughed too loudly. "You always were dramatic." Small talk bloomed and withered in seconds. Compliments about decor, fake warmth about the weather. My parents approached, Dad's arm around Mom like they were starring in a commercial for denial. "Lauren? Honey, we're so glad you're here," Mom said, voice syrupy and shaking. Dad's eyes darted around before he lowered his voice. "Can we talk privately for a moment?" I followed them into a shaded corner by the wine barrels. The music faded, replaced by the cicada's dry whisper. Dad exhaled. "We're in a bit of a tight spot. The final payment for the venue, $60,000, hasn't cleared yet." I stayed silent, watching a drop of condensation roll down my wine glass. He continued. "You know how much this means to your sister. If we don't pay by tonight, they'll cancel. It would humiliate her in front of everyone." Mom nodded, eyes wide with practiced helplessness. "You're doing so well, sweetheart. It's just a family favor. You'll hardly notice the difference." I looked at them both, then slowly set my glass down on the barrel beside me. "You think I'd hardly notice $60,000, I said, my voice even. "Do you remember when I was 18? Mom blinked. "Of course I pulled my iPad from my leather bag and unlocked it with a tap. "Let me show you something." On the screen appeared an email chain from 2008, subject line, "College Fund Transfer Confirmation." I swiped again. Bank receipts labeled Melissa Wedding Deposit. Another swipe. Photo evidence. The withdrawal slip, dated June 14th, 2008. $42,000. My name. My signature. Mom's face paled. Dad opened his mouth, then closed it again. I turned the screen toward them. "You took what I earned, what was promised to me, and you handed it to her like I didn't exist." "Lauren, that was years ago," Mom whispered. "We were trying to keep the family together. You broke it," I said. Melissa joined us then, sensing tension. "What's going on?" "Your sister's being ridiculous," Dad snapped. I ignored him. I scrolled once more and opened another file. This one bright white, official, and stamped. I held it out for all three of them. "These are incorporation papers," I said. "The Hayes Women in Design Foundation. Endowed with $250,000. Melissa's mouth opened. "You started a foundation?" I nodded. "For women who were told they couldn't afford their education. For the ones who got passed over for someone else's mistakes. Every dollar is legally bound to go to them. Not to me, not to you." I took a slow breath, feeling my pulse steady. "It's named after my mentor, Elaine Harper. She was the first person who saw my worth when my own family didn't." Mom's voice trembled. "You could have told us. We would have been proud." "No," I said. "You would have tried to claim it." Silence fell like dust. Around us, music drifted from the reception. Light, cheerful, oblivious. I looked directly at Melissa. "This opportunity has passed," I said quietly. But I made sure others won't lose theirs. Her face flushed deep red. You think this is some kind of moral victory? You show up here and humiliate us. I didn't humiliate anyone, I replied. I just brought a mirror. Dad's hand slammed against the wine barrel, glass shattering. Guests turned. The murmur spread like wind through the vines. Mom started crying, clutching her pearls, whispering, "Please, not here." Melissa's voice rose above the rest, trembling with anger. You ruined everything. I took my sunglasses from my purse, calm as the lake back home. No, I said. I stopped letting you ruin me. Phones were out now. Guests pretending to check messages but clearly recording. Melissa's perfect day dissolving under the weight of truth. As I turned to leave, I heard my father's voice, hoarse with fury. You'll regret this, Lauren. I looked back just once. I already did, for 20 years. The gravel crunched beneath my heels as I walked away, the sun catching the edge of my reflection in the Tesla's window. For a moment, I saw both versions of myself, the girl who once begged to be seen and the woman who no longer needed their eyes. Behind me, shouting erupted. Someone knocked over a tray of champagne. The music stopped entirely, but I didn't look back again. The drive out of Napa was quiet, the road lined with vineyards glowing gold in the late afternoon light. Daniel called as I crossed the county line. How'd it go? He asked, his voice low, steady. I smiled, eyes still on the road. They got the message. What did you say? Just the truth, I said. And the truth doesn't need an apology. For the first time in decades, the air felt clean. The first week after the wedding was a digital storm. 27 missed calls, 52 text messages, a handful of voicemails that started with concern and ended in venom. Lauren, how could you embarrass your sister like that? We're family, we forgive each other. Blood is blood. I read each one once, then archived them. I responded to one. Just one. Blood makes you related, I typed. Love makes you family. Then I put my phone face down and walked away. Daniel started screening my calls after that. When Mom called again, he simply silenced the phone and said, "Not tonight." I didn't argue. By the end of the week, my parents had moved their battle to Facebook. They posted a photo of a family barbecue from 2010, captioned, "Some people forget where they came from." The comment section turned into a war zone. Old neighbors chimed in. High school friends I hadn't spoken to in years wrote things like, "Proud of you, Lauren." And she built her own success. Stop shaming her for it. 2 days later, the local Napa Valley Chronicle published an article. Architect Lauren Hayes launches $250,000. Foundation supporting women in design. They featured a photo of me standing on the deck of my lakefront home, the one I'd designed myself, sunlight flooding through the windows. The caption read, "Worth is earned," says Hayes. I didn't read the comments that time. I didn't need to. Melissa's silence lasted longer, until it didn't. The news broke 3 weeks later. Her husband, Ryan, had been under investigation for tax fraud. Their vineyard home was foreclosed. The same week she lost it, I received a thick envelope from a lawyer's office. Cease and desist, claiming defamation, emotional distress, financial damages. I handed it to my attorney, who looked it over once and smiled faintly. We'll take care of it. It was dismissed within 24 hours. When I told Daniel, he laughed softly. Guess karma works faster these days. Maybe, I said. Or maybe it just runs on truth. He studied me for a moment. You look lighter. I hadn't realized it, but he was right. My shoulders didn't ache anymore. The constant hum of guilt, that invisible leash around my neck, was gone. My therapist, Dr. Monroe, noticed it too. She sat across from me in her usual gray cardigan, hands folded loosely in her lap. They're saying awful things about me online, I admitted. Part of me still wants to defend myself, she nodded. And the other part? The other part doesn't care. Good, she said gently. Because you're not responsible for their feelings. I looked at her, eyes burning a little. It's hard to believe that sometimes. Boundaries aren't punishment, she said. They're protection, especially when you've spent your whole life earning peace you never should have had to earn. I let that sit in the silence between us. After the session, I drove home slowly, taking the long way by the lake. The air was cool, the water a sheet of silver glass reflecting the first trace of dusk. My house, my design, glowed in the distance, every line clean, every window open to the world. Daniel was on the porch when I arrived, barefoot, 2 glasses of wine waiting. "How was therapy?" He asked. "Brutal," I said. "In a good way." He handed me a glass. "That's kind of your specialty." We sat in silence for a while, watching the light fade. Somewhere across the lake, a loon cried. That lonely, beautiful sound that always reminded me of childhood nights I wished someone had come for me. Daniel broke the quiet. "You know," he said, "you finally showed up." "For what?" He turned to me, eyes soft. "For yourself." The words landed deep. I thought of the years I'd spent proving, performing, pleading, all for people who would never see me. And now, at last, I wasn't trying to be seen. I was living in full view. The phone buzzed once more inside the house, a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring until it stopped. The stars came out one by one, quiet and distant, like old wounds finally closing. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel alone. I felt free. 1 year later, the air inside the Portland Convention Center was warm with applause and the hum of quiet emotion. On stage, a young woman, barely 19, with trembling hands clutching the podium, tried to steady her voice. "My family said architecture wasn't for women," she said, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "They told me I should study something easier. But this scholarship," her voice broke for a moment, "this scholarship changed that. It told me I could design my own future." Her words hung in the air like sunlight through stained glass. I sat in the front row, the foundation's name behind her in gold letters, the Hayes Women in Design Foundation. For the first time, hearing my own last name didn't sting. The audience rose to their feet when the girl finished. She turned, found me in the crowd, and smiled through her tears. I smiled back, not the triumphant kind, but the quiet kind, the kind that feels like healing. After the ceremony, I walked outside into the cool Oregon wind. My phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, but when I glanced down, I froze. Melissa. Her message was short. No exclamation marks, no performance. "I'm in therapy. I'm sorry for everything. I don't expect money, just honesty." For a moment I felt something old stir. Not guilt, not pain. Just memory. The echo of a bond that once meant something before it was twisted. I typed slowly. "That's a start. My boundary stands." I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't need one. Some conversations end not with closure, but with clarity. When I got home, Daniel was waiting by the lake with a small sapling wrapped in burlap. "It's a red maple," he said. "Thought we'd plant something today." We dug together in the damp soil near the water's edge. The earth smelled alive, like rain and beginnings. When the roots were covered, I pressed my palm against the trunk and whispered a quiet wish. Not for forgiveness, not even for understanding, but for peace that stayed. Daniel looked up at me, smiling. "What are you thinking?" I watched the lake shimmer under the late afternoon light. The house reflected in the ripples, all glass and openness. "They built walls," I said softly. "I built windows." He nodded, understanding without another word. We stood there as the sun dipped lower, gold spilling across the surface of the water. The house behind us caught the light just right, each pane of glass flickering like a living thing. I thought of all the years I'd spent chasing love in places it didn't exist, of the versions of myself I'd left behind in pursuit of approval that never came. "Worth," I whispered, "isn't measured by what you inherit, but by what you create." Daniel reached for my hand, and together we watched the water settle, smooth and calm, the young tree swaying gently in the breeze. The camera would have pulled back then, if life had a lens, capturing the quiet symmetry of it all. 2 people, 1 sapling, a house of glass, and a woman who finally learned that some distances aren't losses. They're freedom measured in light. The lake stayed still for a long time after that, holding the reflection like a promise.